Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. Now, if you've been following along with me recently, you know I've had a couple early screenings this weekend, and the first one I went and saw, movie I've been dying to see. The minute the first trailer came out, I was like, oh my, this is going to be special. I am so excited. Then I went to Comic-Con and I saw a whole good chunk of this movie. And I was like, I can wait. My expectation level through the roof. I can't even see it. My hands off the screen. It was so high. And when I went and saw this movie, it not only reached my expectations, it passed my expectations. This movie is brilliant, man. Everything you are seeing and reading, it is not BS. People are not just saying this. This movie is legit. So pull up a chair, take a seat, man. We are getting ready to dive into spoiler-free on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Oh my goodness, man. This team, top to bottom, should be so proud of themselves. This movie is not just one of the best animated films of the year. I think it is the best animated film of the year. Which surpasses Incredibles 2, which I didn't think was going to be possible this year. That animation upgrade for Pixar was amazing. This animation is so inventive. Huge risks in this movie, and they all pay off, and it is wonderful to watch. The story is brilliant. This movie just delivers top to bottom. This team should be very, very proud. And that obviously starts with Phil Lord, who had a big hand in writing the movie. Like I said, the writing of the movie is brilliant. This is a wonderful adaptation of the Miles Morales story. Even though it's working within the context of a Spider-Verse story for his origin, it hits the major beats of his origin story really, really well and adapts them in a wonderful way within the context of the film. I think the changes and things that they did to the film, like the look of some of our villains, I think all work and work within the context of a universe that we're not familiar with. Obviously, yes, we're familiar with Miles Morales' universe within the comics, but to really kind of take a drastic difference from what we know, I think really paid off, and that works in the animation and it works within the story, and what Phil Lord has going story-wise, I think is brilliant, not just for Miles, but it's really brilliant in building a massive Spider-Verse that includes a lot of characters. There's a lot of stuff packed into this movie, and it's paced really well. The action is great. The character development is really strong for multiple characters in this movie, and there are a lot of characters. And I think what Phil Lord did from a writing perspective, wonderful. What him and his producing partner, Chris Miller, did from a producing standpoint, this movie is just brilliant, man. It's like I said, it's inventive. It takes huge risks. It reaches far out there, man, and it all works. And a lot of that is, of course, responsible with our directors and animation team. The directors, of course, being Bob Perschetti, Peter Ramsey, Rodney Rothman, and then their animation team. Goodness me, man. Like I said, this is some of the most creative animation I've seen in my life, man. It's so inventive, it's so fresh, it's so new. There are elements to to this movie that when you're watching it, especially on an IMAX screen, which is what I went and saw it on, where like things are kind of out of focus. And it's on purpose. Like sometimes it looks like you should be wearing 3D glasses, but it's not, because there's always something that is in focus, and the way in which that draws your eye to things on the screen, and that the way that plays into the storytelling, really awesome. Some of the sequences in this movie, the first time we're really seeing Miles fly around on a spider web, wow, dude, it's breathtaking, man. Like whipping through the city. The finale is, oh my gosh, man, you want to talk about like a trippy, crazy finale that's just action-packed. That's exactly what we get. The Collider, for those not familiar with what's going on in this, Wilson Fisk creates this massive weapon called or not a weapon, but this massive piece of machinery called the Collider. And it basically is opening up multiple universes, and he's looking for something specific for him. which is why he builds it. I won't spoil what it is because we are, of course, spoiler free. But that is how the multiple universes open up and pull the Spider-Man in accidentally, and it plays into how what plays out in that opening sequence. And that opening sequence is wonderful to watch. Like I said, the action is great, but the emotional beats hit really, really well, and the animation style plays to all of that. I love the way this thing looks, and it is so Brooklyn, man. It's got so many, vibes and feels. It just nails that whole bit so well. Because Brooklyn is so a part of who Miles is, and that's the other thing this movie nails is Miles. The fan base for Miles Morales is going to be ecstatic when they get to see this movie, man, because I saw it in, Times Square at AMC at the IMAX there, packed house, and the place was going bananas. I can't imagine what theaters in Brooklyn are going to be like. This is just a wonderful movie, and this animation team, this directing team, this producing team should all be super proud of what they created. And on top of the animation and the cool action sequences and what we get to see, and the funny moments, this movie is really, really funny. On top of all that, though, this movie is about its characters. This movie is character driven, and the character performances and voice work are wonderful. And it starts with Miles, and like I said, it's a wonderful adaptation for his origin story. It works perfectly within the context of the Spider-Verse, and to build the Spider-Verse, where you could do multiple Spider-Verse movies. I think we already have a sequel lit. That works really well, but at the heart of it, this is Miles' story, and his origin is adapted really well within that context by hitting the beats that are very, very important to his story. It does not, alter those things. Things that are major important things of canon show up in this movie, and they're adapted really, really well. And I just love Miles, man, and that's because Shameik Moore brings him to life. Shameik Moore's voice work in this movie was just wonderful. Everybody's voice work in this movie is wonderful. Like I said, cartoon action, animated action is always awesome, but the voice work is really, really important when you're trying to deliver emotional beats, especially in an animated movie, and they nail all of them. Shameik Moore is absolutely wonderful in this. He really brings, Miles to life, and watching him become a superhero is so cool, man, because he doesn't get it right away, and he gets thrown right into a major situation. And I love seeing his powers start to kick in and turn on at different points, and how he can't control that, and how that story plays into him finally being able to control his powers and finally becoming Spider-Man. And when that moment happens in the movie, it delivers so well, man. It is a huge pop. My audience and crowd members went crazy. It was just so cool to see happen, and a lot of that had to do with him donning his black spider suit, which is so cool. It looks wonderful. There are really, really cool things about it. Small details. Watch around his hands and like the finger area, up around his neck, where when you're in close on it, look and pay attention. There are wonderful elements to the design of his suit that are very, very Miles. And it just feels so authentic to him. One of those little things I absolutely loved. And like I said, though, it not only nails his comic moments, this movie just feels comic accurate everywhere. Everything that it portrays and tries to do feels comic accurate, looks comic accurate. Like I said, so many of these frames look like they're panels within a comic book. And then how the comic book stuff actually gets used within the context of the movie. Every time we meet one of our Spider-Men, we kind of get a little bit of a comic background, where we see things that they've done to become Spider-Man. And when Miles finally gets his, crowd went crazy. But the usage of that is really cool. When and where that stuff gets introduced, some of the things like the lettering, we get a lot of comic book lettering within the movie, and legit panels pop up, and the way that they're introduced and why they're used, I thought were really creative and work, all really well within the context of Miles' story. It was just functioning so well on that standpoint that I absolutely loved it. And then you got, and the other thing that I love about him too is he makes mistakes. Miles is learning throughout this entire movie. And one of the things Shameik Moore does really well is really gives Miles that boost in like personality and what he is as far as a fighter and not giving up. He has some Creed moments in this movie. You've seen Creed, especially Creed 2, and you've seen him go down and then have to get up. There are moments in this movie where you go, oh no, and Miles keeps pushing, and I love that, and how that built him into a superhero by the time you get to the end of the movie. And it was wonderful to watch. But, like I said, this is a Spider-Verse movie. There are a lot of Spider-Men, and his co-star, Jake Johnson, was wonderful as Spider-Man. And there's a couple different Spider-Mans in the movie that aren't like Spider-Gwen, Spider-Noir. They're like the red and blue typical Spider-Man. I won't, ruin who all those different ones are or where they pop up. But the use of Spider-Man throughout the whole movie is wonderful. And I love the general arc of how the arc of all of the Peter Parkers and that we see in the movie. That arc is wonderful, and it adds to the levity and to the gravity and the fact that there are real stakes in this movie. There are real threats in this movie. Peter Parker's story in the movie really illustrates that. And then I love how it ties into Miles's story. I love how he's able to mentor him. Some of the early mentoring between him, the Shameik Moore's Miles Morales, and the Jake Johnson Peter Parker are great, and I love their interaction. Shameik Moore and Jake Johnson's chemistry is brilliant, and I really love the way that the Spider-Man story works in this movie. Peter Parker gets a pretty legit storyline start to finish that kind of follows right underneath Miles's, and when you look at both of them together, this movie turns into a wonderful love letter to Steve Ditko and, of course, Stan Lee, the people responsible for this wonderful character and all the characters it creates. And that's why I highlight that, because, Stan and Steve didn't create Miles, but that came from their Spider-Man creation. This whole movie is like a wonderful love letter to those two guys. It really is just... there are emotional moments in this movie, specifically with Stan Lee, because he does get a cameo, and it might be one of the best cameos for Stan. It's like the perfect Stan Lee cameo. It brought a tear to my eye, and then there's a nice tribute. Make sure you stick around toward the end of the movie to both of them. And it is. I don't think it was intentionally meant to be that, but I think you're always keeping in mind that you want to adhere to the authenticity. And the Lorad Miller do a wonderful job along with their team in capturing that stuff. And like I said, Spider-Man in the red and blue, Peter Parker plays a huge role in this movie, and his storyline follows right underneath Miles. So even though this is Miles' movie, Peter has major stuff going on, and he gets a full arc, and I love the way that played out. And Jake Johnson is hysterical. I loved his version of Peter Parker. I loved how the tweaks and changes to that, and how that sticks out to be true. And like I said, as we meet all of our different Spider-Men, we get these kind of like comic flashes where we see things they've done. And the Spider-Man ones are awesome because it's stuff that we're familiar with from the movies and different comic book pages. I love the way that all played, and like I said, when Miles finally got his, our crowd went crazy. But the second person, of course, that gets one of theirs is, of course, Spider-Gwen, who's voiced by Hailee Steinfeld. I thought she was wonderful. I love her action sequences. She's so cool, man. I like you feel bad for Miles sometimes in this movie because you're like, nothing you do is going to make you as cool as Gwen Stacy right now. And she is awesome as Spider-Gwen. I thought Hailee Steinfeld did a really, really great job. I think there's a future for Spider-Gwen off on her own. I think there's a future for almost all of our Spider-Men in their own movies. And of course, a huge future in the Spider-Verse context. But I loved her chemistry with Miles. I thought the chemistry between Hailee Steinfeld and Shameik Moore within their voice work really elevated those characters and drove their story. And I love how that all played out and where it ends up by the end. I love Spider-Gwen, and I thought she was represented really well in the movie. And like I said, from her look to her movements to everything that was going on with her, where she shows up and pops in, I love the humor to her character, and how things play out, like I said, with her and Miles. It's really awesome. Spider-Noir was fantastic. Thank you, Nick Cage, and thank you, Phil Lord. The dialogue for Spider-Noir is so good, and it is executed perfectly by Nick Cage. It makes you laugh, and it just plays so well in the movie. He looks so cool. I love that hat. If you gave me a Spider-Noir movie that had a 25-minute Spider-Ham movie as an intro, sign me the heck up, because John Mulaney as Spider-Ham is also brilliant. He really brought Spider-Ham to life, and I love the way Spider-Ham's animation is different from everybody else's. He's more Looney Tune-ish And just the way he plays, he has a couple of gags that hint at the fact that he's like a cartoon, and that he's a talking pig, and it's just really, really funny. I love both his and Spider Noir's montages when we get to introduce them as Spider-Man. I loved where they showed up and how they showed up, along with their third counterpart that we'll get to in a minute. But I just loved both of those guys a lot. I would love to see, like I said, give me a 25-minute Spider-Ham movie in front of a Spider Noir Spider-Man movie. I'm in. But I would also be in for a little Penny Parker Spider-Man movie. I didn't know anything about Penny Parker coming into this one, man. And she's awesome. Also, loved her animation style, and how it's different, more toward the anime side of things. And I thought she was really cool, man. I mean, she's got a, if you also are unfamiliar, she has a telepathic link to her spider that controls a robot. And the relationship between all three of those things in the movie is awesome. It plays really well, hits big notes. I really enjoyed Kimiko Glenn, who voices her. I thought did a great job. I loved everything about Penny Parker. Simon, you want to give me like a girl team up? Gwen Stacy, Penny Parker. Oh man, like I said, any combination of using any of these characters in their own movie or in different variations of movies, I think Lorad Miller may have opened up Pandora's box because this animation style, like I said, I don't know how long it took to do this, but I just want it all the time now. And all these characters, they're so rich. They all, even at the minimum, the ones that are more minimal than our main two, they're all really, really big. And like I said, that voice work is so important, and I think it's done really well by all of them. And that's not it, man. We're not done. There are other major characters in this movie, like Miles's parents. And Miles's parents is something I loved in this movie, giving a superhero actual parents who aren't dead. He's got both parents alive. That's huge for a superhero. But also huge when you're talking about, the minority story from a black perspective, or we've seen it with a lot of different minorities where they come from the broken homes in these urban areas. It was really important, and it's very important to Miles's character that he comes from a complete family unit, and one that's interracial in and of itself, with his dad being African American, and his mom being Hispanic. It just, all of that plays into who Miles is, and a huge part of that is, of course, his parents, and Jefferson Davis and Rio Morales are awesome in the movie. I would have liked a little bit more Rio, but they play really well in the movie. They're very important to the movie, not just for what Miles is, but to things that are happening in the movie. And their voice work done wonderfully by Brian Tyree Henry. He's on fire lately. Widows, also a knockout. And Luna Lauren Velez, just, I mean, like a pro, huge pro, icon. Luna Lauren Velez has been around for forever, man. I love her, which is why I want more of Rio Morales, because they both do a really good job, and the story and the way they're used is great. I really love the relationship between Miles and his dad. I would have liked to have seen more of Miles and his mom, but the stuff with him and his dad is great. They have some really, really wonderful emotional moments in the movie that play really, really well, and some of them hit hard and some of them are funny. But it's a really interesting relationship, knowing that Jefferson Davis is not a fan of superheroes, and specifically not a fan of Spider-Man. And then of course there's Aunt May when she pops up in the movie. I loved her, played by Lily Tomlin. Really, really well done. And I loved everything about Aunt May. She is badass in this movie, and her moments are great. I really dug her and where she plays and how she plays within Miles's life as well. And then, of course, Aaron Davis, the Prowler, Miles's uncle, voiced by Mahershala Ali. Phenomenal. I really dug his action, the way the Prowler moves. He has a really cool bike. His weaponry is really neat. He constantly has like a purple glow that follows him. I really, really dug that. And I love the way that storyline played out. in the movie, and how that all drives and motivates things that are going on with Miles, both from his art standpoint. Miles likes to tag walls and stuff and do graffiti, which of course is a problem because his dad is a cop. But I love that relationship, and I love the way that worked within the story, and to have all these characters, and that's not all of them. I mean, there are a bunch of characters throughout this whole movie, but to have all that working and going on, it's amazing how it just all worked, and everybody got fair play. I mean, I really thought there was good character development for a lot of these characters, really good performances from all of these characters. And when you throw that into a really good story and this unbelievable animation, you end up with a 20-minute non-spoiler review from the Seaman. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is just absolutely marvelous. It is one of my favorite movies of the year, maybe my favorite Spider-Man movie of all time. But now it's time for me to shut up, and it's time for you to tell me what you're thinking. If you have not gone to see the movie yet, which is fair. There's just one early release day. Now we'll have to wait. I think it's the 18th or the 21st or something in there. There's so many movies coming out in that time period. But I want to know, man, what you're excited for, what you're looking forward towards, what you hope to see from this movie. Let me know that down below. If you have seen the movie, try to keep it spoiler free or mark it as such. But let me know what you're thinking. What was some of the stuff that you absolutely loved? What did you like with the animation or with the characters? Who was your favorite? Who's your favorite Spider-Man? I'm certainly a massive Miles fan after this movie. I know some of Miles' story. I've read some of his comics, but I've always been a Peter Parker guy deep down. I might be a Miles guy now. I'm telling you, man, he's trying to take the throne. And it's well deserved because this movie's phenomenal. But I want to know what you're thinking there. As always, if you've actually made it this long to the end of the movie, congratulations. Thank you for sticking around. This is a long one. But if you enjoyed this long-winded non-spoiler review, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe and little bell so you can join the squad and get alerts every time I make a new video. For the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down, I am the Seaman, and I am signing off. Peace! Seaman telling you to check some videos. Click here or here and subscribe over there.